Okay, welcome back. We're still on page 4 talking about the internet plus the extranet and the intranet. The next thing I talk about is the web standards. We talked about who runs the internet. Now we're talking about who runs the web. And once again, it's a standards committee. In this case, it's called the World Wide Web Consortium. Kind of an abbreviation is W3C, World Wide Web Consortium. Anyway, these are the people who put together like the HTML standard, that kind of stuff. So we're using HTML5 for this textbook in the course. So that's where it came from, these guys. So the terminology is kind of weird. Most people say the HTML5 standard. That's not what they say. They say recommendation. So it goes through a draft, goes through a request for comments, and maybe goes through several draft recommendations. And then finally, when they get to the end, they end up with a recommendation. So that's what they call a standard. Everyone else calls it a standard, but they don't. Okay, cool. So these are the document standards for both the browsers, what the browsers need to be able to do, and for web authors like us, because that's what we're teaching you, how to be a web author, on what to do and what not to do. Okay, that's what these guys do for a living. Continuing on page 5, they talk about web accessibility. It's a big thing. It used to be, So here's this web content accessibility guide. These things have been around a while. They're pretty good. One of the things that's going to happen in this course is every single time you turn in an assignment, I'm going to check it against the web accessibility standards. So you're going to be graded on whether or not you've done everything the way it's supposed to be done according to this. Okay, just telling you. That's the way it's going to work. We'll talk about how to do that mechanically when we get to those elements that require some sort of accessibility. Let's talk about the laws, because it's kind of weird. The U.S. government kind of got into this and said, well, by God, the Americans with Disability Act is applicable to, these kinds of things. Well, yeah, they are to businesses and government. Basically, if you're open to business, you basically have to follow those rules. There's another one called the Section 508 of the Federal Rehabilitation Act. Most people just call it Section 508. They don't even bother to say what the law is. And this is the law that basically said that all government websites have to follow these accessibility guides. It made it a law. Up to that point, it was sort of like, yeah, it'd be a great idea, but now it's a law. Now, I said government websites. So does Section 508 apply to me if I'm just going to have a website selling Beanie Babies? I don't know. Kind of weird, huh? Okay. So the next thing I talk about is the concept of universal design. And in the context of accessibility, we started with, okay, we need to put a wheelchair ramp in here. Maybe we need to have one of those automatic door openers at the entrance to the grocery store. Okay, that's how it started. And then they realized, this just makes good sense. It's more hygienic and easier if the customers don't have to open their own doors. It's convenient. And if you're pushing a cart full of groceries, don't you really want a ramp to roll down rather than steps? So the concept of accessibility kind of bled over to, this made a heck of a lot of sense anyway. And the examples I always talk about is curb cuts. You know how it used to be that you go downtown on the sidewalk and you'd step down on the curb and you'd cross the street and you'd come up on the curb and you'd go down the sidewalk again. And then most cities went through and did curb cuts where they made it level out and made a tiny little ramp. And they did it for people in wheelchairs. But let's say I've got a hand cart full of books that I'm taking to the bookstore. Am I going to use that same ramp? Well, of course. Am I going to use the automatic door opener? Well, of course. So the idea is, don't think of these things as, well, I'm accounting for disability. Think of it as universal. Make it so everyone can use it. It's kind of a way of thinking. Instead of thinking for exceptions, you think about the general rule. This ought to be there regardless if I have any customers at all who have disabilities. It's a good idea to begin with. It's a universal design. Okay. On page 6, they talk about the reliability of the information on the internet. And I'm gonna tell you a story because it's a little weird. So, several things you need to check. Let's say that you're pulling some information off a website. Well, first question is this a credible organization? Is it a real organization or just some flat earth society decided to pop up a web page? Okay. Is information recent? I mean, it very well could be that what they provided you was correct 2 years ago, but is not correct now. And does it have background links where you can go check for yourself? Is there other references, essentially? And when they say, well, I believe the Earth is flat, and they reference some NASA, something that says, yes, the Earth really is flat rather than a sphere. Whatever. So if those things are present, then there's a higher degree of reliability. Now, I want to specifically talk about Wikipedia. Wikipedia is great. It's a community-based system where anybody can go in and edit the content. And however, their method of doing conflict resolution is a little weird. Let's say, for example, that you are the world's authority on Jesse James, okay? And, you've written PhD thesis, dissertation on Jesse James. You've got copies of his grandmother's Bible. I mean, you are the world's expert. And so you go to Wikipedia and on Jesse James and it says, well, he was born on June 3rd. And you go, no, that's not right. He was born on June 2nd. I've got the family Bible where somebody wrote it down. I know this is the answer. And so you change it to July 2nd. And then you come back the next day and it got changed back to July 3rd. You go, well, that's a little weird. So you change it to July 2nd again. And what happens is, the way the Wikipedia works is majority rules. In other words, if 10 people think the answer is the 3rd, then, and only one person says the answer is the 2nd, the answer is going to be, on the page is going to be the 3rd. Doesn't matter if you are more credible. See the point? In other words, authority and credibility is not the issue. For them, it is sheer numbers. So if half of the people in the United States think that, UFOs are real, well, then Wikipedia is going to say UFOs are definitely real. See? Now, isn't that kind of odd? Majority rules is not necessarily the way you ought to do scholarly journals. That's, by the way, that's why all courses in college, no matter what, not just this course, but all courses say don't use Wikipedia. Because it's not factually based, it's consensus based. Okay, so we've all heard enough about fake news, so let's just kind of move on. On page 7, they talk about the ethical use of the web. So let me ask you questions. You've talked about copyright laws. Is this considered published works? This page right here, is this considered public works? So, for example, let's say, can I just go here to this little graphic? Whoop. Okay, how about this little graphic? I go to this little graphic and just say, save picture. Okay, and so I'm going to save this picture, and there it is. Now, I'm going to take that, and I'm going to put that in a PowerPoint presentation that I'm getting ready to give to my boss. Is that right? Did I do something wrong? Yeah. You can't just go to the web and find something and copy and paste, okay? You can't grab their text without permission. You can't grab their graphics without permissions. You can't do any of that stuff. Now, so I can't grab their graphics. I can't steal, for example, their design of their web page. Let's say I look at this, I go, hey, that's pretty cool. I kind of like this little thing over here in the corner and all that, and 3 little panels. I think I'm going to use this as the basis for my web page. Can I do that? No. So can I copy an article an entire article, like a PDF file, maybe I can just copy that and use that someplace? No. The bottom line is, yes, there are some what's called fair use, and this is not an ethics course, and it's not a legal course, and we don't have the time to go into all of that. So let me just put it to you this way. If you're going to take something off the internet and use it, particularly if it's in a commercial setting, you really need to ask permission. Now, I have done this on occasion, where I've sent people saying, I really like this graphic, I'd like to use it in my presentation. For example, I was doing a thesis, and I wanted a Dilbert cartoon on the front page of my thesis. Okay, so I wrote to Scott Adams and said, I'd really love to use this cartoon in my thesis. Is that okay? And they went, great, no problem. That's considered fair use. You're good to go. Plus, they were tickled to death that I was using their cartoon. Okay, but you have to ask. All right. Let's don't beat that. Just as an interesting note, not all countries have the same kind of libel laws. This kind of comes up. For example, if I have I'm doing a review of some products, and I go to Amazon and I go down to the review section and I put a bunch of stuff in there saying, well, that's the worst toaster I've ever had. It always burns my toast. Don't ever buy brand X toaster ever again. That's perfectly legit in most cases. However, in some places, like in England, the libel laws are written so that if your statements financially damage a company, then that's libel. It doesn't matter if it was true. Okay? In our world, the only way it would be libelous is if it was determined that the statements you said were not correct. Not that way everywhere. In England, you don't have to be right. Being right doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if everything you said was factually true. If you did it in a malicious manner designed to cause that company harm by reducing their sales because of your review, well, then you're guilty. Okay. Again, this is not a legal course, and geez, we ain't got enough time to go into all that. So I just wanted to keep going. Okay. So let's keep going. Page 8, they talk about the network. Network overview. Okay, so basically what we're talking about is, this is the kind of stuff that people have like in their homes. I have a device, a cable modem. I'm using Spectrum Time Warner. So I have a device provided by the company, and then it goes to what most people call a router. And the router is a router, and it's a switch, and it's a Wi-Fi device, blah, 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 blah. And I do have a connection going to a printer, and a connection going to a PC, and a connection going to a little server box thing. So this is essentially a good example of what a network looks like, as if you didn't already know. Okay, so they talk about basically types of networks. Most common is what's called the local area network. And basically the local area network, in a nutshell, is typically the wiring that's inside a single building. I mean, that's not technically the correct answer, but give me a break. It's something that belongs to you and is under your control. That's a local area network. In other words, I'm not using any third-party connection to get from point A to point B. All the wiring is mine. All the devices are mine. That's a local area network, typically inside just a single building. If I want to connect another building, and if it's a really short distance, maybe I'll run the wire myself. But if it's a really long distance, then it'll probably be a wide area network, and I'll probably involve a third party. I'm probably not going to run a cable between building A and building B if they're 5 miles apart in the smack dab in the middle of Dallas, right? I probably won't run my own cable. I'll hire a service to do that. That would be a wide area network, typically several buildings, and probably not all under your control. Okay, once again, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark, so we'll just pause this and continue in just a minute.